Welcome to Design 113 Intermediate CAD. This is the video for Lab Q, and in this video we're going to be drawing this heavy-duty V-pulley. And we're actually going to create a 3D model of this and then lay it out in our page view, kind of like we have before. So I'm hoping that this lab will give you guys a little bit more practice with some of the stuff that we've already learned and kind of solidify it as far as how to model 3D models, how to move them into layout view, how to add your title block and create views and sections and all that type of stuff. And then when we're done, we'll actually add the dimensions on this one at the end too, so we'll have a complete finished working drawing for this part. So when you model this stuff in 3D, what you want to try and do is create this in as few commands as possible. So I kind of think of this as a chess game when I model this stuff in 3D, and you want to basically win this chess game in as few moves as possible. So when you look at these models, I mean, you could do multiple cylindrical extrudes on the top of this, but really the easiest way to do this with as few commands as possible is the revolve tool. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to build the section view of this as a sketch, half of it, and then I'm going to rotate it around this center axis, and I'll be able to get basically the entire model in one command, one revolve command, except for this hole right here that would be for a set screw. So everything in this model we can do in one revolve command except for this screw right here, the screw hole, and I'll show you how to go back and put that hole in for a set screw after we do the revolve command. So to start out with, just like always, I've created a new file in AutoCAD from our ACAD 3D template, and this is a metric drawing, so I'm going to change a couple things in here before we get started. But for any drawing, the stuff that I like to do usually is change from perspective to parallel projection. So I'm going to type in perspective and set that to 0 to turn that off and change to parallel projection. And then the other thing I like to do is turn the grid off, so I'm going to turn that grid off. And then finally I need to change from inches to millimeters since we're doing a metric drawing, so I'm going to type in units and hit enter, and right here I can change from inches to millimeters and hit OK. And now I'm ready to start sketching. So what I'm going to do is, remember you can only sketch on your XY plane, so I'm going to go to the top of my view cube so that I can actually sketch in my XY plane over here. And you'll probably have to hit the rotate button so that it's right side up. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by drawing out a line that will be my center line. So I'm just going to use my line tool, and before I do that, actually I'm going to change the color of this 0 layer. By default in your 3D files, AutoCAD makes it gray, but I prefer for it to be white, so I'm going to change that color and come to my index color tab and change that to white and hit OK. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do now is kind of lay out a center line for us. That's going to be the axis of rotation for this pulley when we do the revolve command in 3D. And I'm just going to start by making this about 50 units long probably. And I'm going to change my my polar snap to probably 30 degrees starting out. And I'm going to make a line that's about 50 units long. And you'll probably notice that you're zoomed in way too far. So if you need to do a zoom extents, double click the scroll wheel on your mouse and get back far enough where you can see this line. Because in these 3D files it's hard to tell how you're zoomed in and what you're looking at actually until you draw something. So I'm going to draw that center line, and then I'm just going to start by building with my sketch tools the profile of this thing as a section view. So this would be the center of the center hole right here. So I'm going to offset that over to the left 7 units. And so this would actually be half of the center hole right here. The whole center hole for the pulley would come all the way over to here. And the next thing I'm going to do is offset that center line over 27 units to the left. So I'll go over 27, and then I'm actually going to connect these two from here to here. And then I'll take this same line and go down 20 units. And what I'm really doing is I'm just building this top section right here and this first section that goes down. So that's kind of what we're sketching, and after I get that in there, I'm going to build this lower area right here, and then I'll find the outside edge and then go back and fill in the details here. So to start out with, we're kind of working on this area right here, then we'll move to the outside and then finally finish out the middle. So I'm going to take this line and offset it down by 20 units. or 20 millimeters. And I'll take that straight down. And then I'm also going to take this and offset it out again 31 units to there. And that's actually where this should extend out to. So I'm going to take the grips and actually move that over to here. And now I can do a little bit of trimming. Okay. And now if I take this top line right here and offset it down 50 units, that's where the bottom of this should end up. So I'm going to offset that 50 down, which matches up nicely, so that's what we're looking for. And then actually this needs to come all the way over to here. And this line right here we can trim back. So here's kind of the middle piece of this pulley, or the hub, that we're going to swing around this axis to generate that geometry. So what I need to do now is figure out where the outside edge of that pulley goes over here, and then we can kind of put that web shape in the middle that connects the hub to the V-pulley on the outside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset that center line by 67 millimeters out to the left, and then I also need to locate that top to bottom. So the center of the V-pulley actually is based off of the center of this line. So if I take that out, that's really the center for the V shape that goes right here. And the next thing that I'm going to do is just take this line and offset it up and down by 17 units to figure out where the top and bottom of that pulley go. And you might find that you'll need to take this line and extend it down. So really what we're working on right here is this edge and also the top and bottom lines right here. So we're kind of working on filling this in right here. And the next thing I need to do is figure out how far this line comes over right here, because that's going to be kind of the top flat area on the pulley. And if you do a little bit of math, you'll figure out that that is 10 millimeters deep. So I'm actually going to use this intersection point and trim this off. And I'm going to draw another line over that is 10 millimeters on the top and on the bottom. And then I can actually delete these two because we don't need them anymore. They're just construction lines. And then I'm going to take these and go down 2 millimeters and up 2 millimeters. And we're getting fairly close at this point. We also need to make a line. You can delete that. We need to make a line right here that comes down 5 millimeters. And then another corresponding one down here on the bottom that comes up 5 millimeters. And at this point, what we really can do is take these lines at 20 degrees back into the hub of the pulley, and that's really going to give us the shape we're looking for. So the trick on this to get those lines in there is to set up your polar tracking to 20 degrees. So I'm going to go to my settings menu, and you'll see that we don't have a choice for 20 degrees, but you can still go in here and just type in 20 and hit OK. And so that's going to give me the angle I'm looking for, and 20 degrees on the top and 20 degrees on the bottom will come together to give you that 40 degrees you're looking for. So you're actually going to set your polar tracking to half of this, since we have to do a line on the top and on a line on the bottom. 20 and 20 is going to end up giving you the 40 you're looking for. So what I'm going to do now is just draw lines at 20 degrees back to where they intersect with the hub. So back to there, and down to there. And then I'll do the same thing off of this point, except we need to figure out what it's supposed to intersect with right here. So if you take this line and offset it to the right 25 millimeters, that's the distance we're looking for. So I'm going to take this and offset it over 25 and just kind of bring it down. And you may have to turn your ortho on temporarily and then go back to your polar tracking. Because remember, your polar tracking is locked into 20 degrees, so when that's turned on, it will not let you draw a vertical line. So you may have to turn it off temporarily and then turn it back on. And then I'm going to draw some more 20 degree lines, and the next line we're looking for is the line that starts here and it extends to our mark we just made. So we're getting very close at this point, so I'm going to do a little bit of trimming and deleting. We actually don't need this line anymore. And this one here we need to trim. So we'll do a little bit of trimming on this. And then I can trim this line out also. We don't need that. And so the only thing we really have left here is to kind of soften up these corners by putting in the radius. So you can see right here they have a radius of 3 in 4 locations. And the 4 locations are actually here and here, and then on the inside right here and here. So we need to add in that radius at 4 locations. And the best way that I've found to do this is to use your circle tool and use the tangent radius circle tool. So I'm going to use that. And to use this, you're going to pick 2 tangent points and then a radius. So my first tangent point is going to be this line. Then my second tangent point will be this line. And then finally, you'll put in the radius. So these will have a radius of 3. And you'll see once you do that, it will give you a circle that size that just touches this line and just touches that one. So I'm going to do that here, 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 and here in all 4 of the locations. So select one line, select the other, then put in your radius. First line, second line, radius, and finally right here, first line, second line, and my radius. And what you can do at this point is just use your trim tool and trim away what you don't want. And you may have to zoom in on this part to get it right. It can be a little bit tricky. Or you can do them one at a time if that helps. There we go. So we should have the completed profile now. And before you actually go to your 3D menu, remember that from our past labs, if you want to correctly turn this into 3D geometry, we actually need to take all these lines and we need to turn them into a polyline. So before I go to my 3D menu, I'm going to type in pedit, and I'm going to choose M for multiple, because I want to select multiple lines and turn them into polylines. So hit M for multiple. And now it's going to ask me to select the objects. So I'm going to select everything here except for the center line. You don't want to select that center axis. So I'm going to choose all of my lines here that make up my profile and hit enter. And it's going to ask me if I want to convert those to polylines, and I do, so I'm going to say yes. And finally, now that they're all polylines, I want to join them together into one shape. So after I hit yes, I'm going to type J for join. And it's going to ask me for a fuzz distance. You'll just say 0. And after you've done all that, you can hit escape. And if you click on this, you'll see now that it is treated as one continuous polyline. So there's no breaks in this anywhere. So now when we revolve that, AutoCAD's going to know that we want this to be a solid 3D shape. So at this point, probably a good idea to go ahead and save your drawing, since we've put a fair amount of time into sketching it. And again, we're working on LabQ, so I'll just call this labq.dwg and save that. And once that saves, we're actually ready now to change over to our 3D Basics menu. So I'm going to come up here and change from Drafting and Annotation to 3D Basics. And then I'm going to switch over to sort of an isometric view so I can see this a little bit better when I revolve it. And I'm going to come up here and choose the Revolve tool. And it's going to ask me to select the objects I want to revolve, which would be our polyline profile that we just created. So I'll choose that and hit enter. And then it's going to ask me to specify the axis. So I'm going to choose the start point for the axis first, which is right here. And then it'll ask me for the end point, which is going to be up here at the top. And then finally, AutoCAD is going to ask you for what angle you want to revolve this through. So you don't always have to do 360. You can put in different angles if you want to. But in this case, we're going to do a full 360 again. So I'll say 360, hit enter. And there we've pretty much got our shape, if you see. The only thing we're missing is that hole that goes through the middle. And I like to change this to shades of gray usually, so I'm going to change from realistic over to our shades of gray style. Kind of makes it a little bit easier to see the edges. And then you'll notice that our center axis right here that we used is still there, and I'm actually going to take that and delete that, since we really don't need that anymore. And finally, what we need to do is locate that circle that goes right through the middle for the set screw. So through the middle of the hub right here. So to get that in there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change from my 3D Basics menu back to my Drafting and Annotation menu. And we're just going to draw in a little bit of geometry right here that we can use to put that hole in there. And so I'm going to start with my line tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my back view. And I'm going to start a line that matches up with the front face of the pulley by using my O-snap. And if you rotate back, you'll see that what you've really done is you've locked on to the center of the middle of the hub with a line. And what I want to do is go back towards the back of the pulley 7 millimeters. And you may have to actually turn off or change your polar tracking setting because it's still on 20 degrees, which isn't going to let you go straight back. So I would recommend for this step changing your polar tracking to 90. So start that line and you're going to lock on to the center of the front of the hub. Make sure you're on 90. And then what I like to do for this part is, while I've got this line command going, I'll actually click on the top of my view cube, and this way I can make sure that my line is straight. So I'll go straight back at 7 millimeters and hit enter. And you can't really see where it ends up, but you know based on your measurements that it's got to be right. So you can hit escape, and now if you kind of zoom in and rotate around, you'll see that you've got that line in there exactly where you want. And remember, we're always sketching on the XY plane, so anything we sketch is actually in line with that XY plane. So we know that the height has to be right, and we know it's going straight back in the Y direction. And the next thing I'm going to do after I've got that line located is we know that that circle that's going to turn into the hole, the center point, is going to be right here at the end of the line that we just drew. So I'm going to use my center diameter tool, and I'm going to grab right onto the end of that line, and you'll see, since we're sketching on the XY plane down here, that it stays in line with the XY plane when I make a circle. So I'm going to put in a diameter of 10, and that is going to become the hole that we will extend up. And really we don't need this line anymore, so we can delete that. All we're interested in is the circle. So now, since we have that circle in there, I'm going to go back to my 3D Basics menu. I'm going to grab the extrude tool, and once I do that, I'm going to select our circle, hit enter, and what we want to do is just take that up to where it exits the hub of the pulley. So someplace up here, it really doesn't matter where, as long as you break through the outside of the hub. So I'm going to go to right about there, and now I'm just going to use my subtract tool. And remember, the first thing you choose is what you want to subtract from, so I'm going to select the pulley, hit enter, and now I'll go back and select the cylinder that we drew, hit enter again, and you'll see that it puts the hole in there for you. And the trick on this really is getting that in there so you have just the hole on this side and it doesn't go all the way through, because remember, it should only go through half of the pulley, not all the way through. So that's kind of how you can get that in there and just go halfway through. And I find it's easier to work from the inside out, because on the outside you have this curved edge that is very difficult to align sketches to. So if you work from the inside out, you don't have to worry about your sketch being flat against that tangent edge. So at this point, we've really got all of our modeling done. We're ready to take this into a page view, so probably a good time to go ahead and hit the quick save button again. And what we're going to do is jump over to our layout tab and set up a couple of views for this. So go to your layout tab, and you'll probably have a viewport thrown in there already by default, but I'm just going to go ahead and delete that, because we're really going to use the model views for this instead of the viewports. So the first thing that I'm going to do in layout is delete that viewport, and then I'm going to go to my drafting and annotation menu, and I'm going to add a white layer that I'm going to throw the model onto, because remember, you really don't want to model things on the 0 layer. That's bad practice. So I'm going to make a model layer that's white, and I'm going to go back to my model space and actually put the pulley onto that model layer. Putting things on the 0 layer is really bad practice. So now we've got that on the model layer. So I'm going to go back to my layout tab. That's fixed. and I'm actually going to insert my title block that we've been using all along now. So I'll insert that and hit open and hit OK. And then while I'm actually inserting this, remember, since it's a metric drawing, I'm going to have to scale this title block down. But before I place it, I'm going to go down here and type S so that I can scale it before I place it even. And it's going to ask me for the scale, which in this case is going to be 0.03937, since we're going from inches to metric. And now I can drop this at 0, 0. And I'm going to go ahead and fill out my title block. We're going to have one page. This is millimeters. And since I've practiced this one already, I know that I'm going to end up with a couple different scales on this, so I'm just going to say that my scale will vary. And I'm going to call this Lab Q Heavy Duty V-Pulley. And once you get your title block filled out, you can hit OK. And I'm going to select this and drop it onto a title block layer. So make sure you don't put your title block on the 0 layer. It should have its own layer. So don't just put everything on the 0 layer. That's bad practice. And at this point, we're ready to start setting up our views. So I'm going to go to my Layout tab. And once I get over to my Layout tab, instead of putting in viewports like we have in the past, I'm going to come over here and use these Create Views buttons. So I'm actually going to create views from my 3D model. So I'm going to start by choosing Base. And I'm going to create a base view from my model space. And your computer may crunch for a second when you choose this, so sometimes it takes a minute to calculate this stuff. But I'm going to start by choosing my view. Instead of from the list here, I'm going to go to my model space selection and choose it from model space. So I really want to look at this thing from this angle, so I'm going to start by picking back, except I want to have this hole right here for the set screw so it's pointed over to the left. So I'm going to choose back. And then that hole for the set screw that's up and down right now, I'm going to rotate this over once. So now it's over here on the left. And once you're happy with that, hit the Return to Layout button. And then you also want to make sure that you hit Current right here so that it matches up to what you actually selected in your model space selection. So if you don't hit Current, it's not going to give you what you picked in there. So always make sure you hit Current if you do that. And I'm going to choose my visible and hidden lines. And I'm going to go with a scale of 1 to 40 here. So I'll do a 1 to 40 scale, and I'm just going to drop this right here in my page. And when you're happy with it, you can hit OK. And at that point, AutoCAD is going to try and talk you into projecting some extra views here, which if you want them, this would be a good time to go ahead and place them. But I'm going to, instead of doing my right view, I'm actually going to do a section view. So I'm just going to right click, and it'll go ahead and create my view for me. And then the next thing I'm going to do is to a section view through the middle of this pulley. So I'm going to come up here to my section tool and choose that, and it's going to ask me which view I want to create a section view from, which will be my front view, so I'll choose my front view. And now I have to draw my cutting plane line of where I'm actually going to slice this view at. So I'm going to use the quadrant O snap, and I'm just going to slice right through the middle of this thing. So draw your start point, and then come on down here and draw your ending point, and click. And once you have picked the top and bottom, make sure you right click once to end your cutting plane line drawing. So I'm going to right click once, and now it's going to let me choose where I want to place the view at. And I can either place it over here or over here, but in this case I want to see the hole right here, so I'm going to place my view over here. And you'll see that AutoCAD changes your cutting plane line to correspond with wherever you put the view at. So the direction of those arrowheads is important. So I'm going to place my section view over here and do a left click to place it. And if you're happy with everything here, you can go ahead and hit OK. And AutoCAD will go ahead and draw that section view for you. And then also it will put this nice little label down here that sometimes gets a little bit large, but it is nice to have in your drawing. So I'm going to take this and move it up and actually scale it down a little bit. The text size on that's a little bit too large, but that's easily fixed. I'm going to select this and just do a scale command. So you can type in SC, or you can go back to your home menu and pick the scale tool and choose a base point. And I'm going to scale this down by half, so just put in 0.5 and hit enter. And now I'm just going to move this to where it's kind of centered up underneath my view. And then what I like to do actually, if I have one of these on my drawing, I like to go ahead and put the rest of them on there. Since we've said that our scale varies, nobody's really going to know what the scale of these views is unless we tell them. So I'm going to take this actually and copy it and paste it over here underneath my front view and then change the text. So I'm going to change this to where it says front view scale 1 to 40. So you can delete this junk that's in here, and I'm just going to say front view, and my scale is going to be 1 to 40. And then finally I'm going to create an isometric view up here. So to do that, I'm going to go back to my layout tab one more time, and I'm going to choose a base view from model space, and I'm going to go to my model space selection, and it might help if you just kind of free rotate this thing a little bit to get it close to where you want. So I want something sort of close to that, and then once you're happy with where it's at roughly, you can hit the view cube and lock it in so you have a perfect isometric view. If you free rotate, it won't be an exact isometric, so when you're done free rotating, make sure you hit that view cube to lock it in. And I'll return to my layout, and make sure you hit that current button, because you can see right now it's not matching up to what we selected. So hit current, and then I'm going to choose a scale up here, and I'm going to make this a 1 to 60 scale, but you can see 1 to 60 doesn't show up in my list, so I'm just going to type it in here that I want 1 to 60, and hit enter. And I'm going to change the visibility style of this, so I'm going to change from hidden lines to where I just have shaded with visible lines, so it looks sort of realistic. So I'm just going to take this and drop it up here in the corner, and you can hit OK. And again, it's going to see if you want to project other views off of this. I don't, so I'm just going to right click to end. And I'm going to take this and copy and paste it up here also, and I'm just going to call this isometric view and tell them what the scale is. So I'll say this is my isometric view, and you can stretch this out a little bit if you need to. And my scale is 1 to 60. And finally, I'm just going to take this section view and move it over to the left a little bit so I have some space. And I can move the front view over a little bit too. That's pretty good. And my final challenge for you guys is to actually place some dimensions on this. So as far as what dimensions you need, if you go to here and kind of take these dimensions and use them as a reference, if you have all these dimensions on your drawing, you know it'll be fully dimensioned. But what I want you guys to do is go to your Annotate tab, and you'll probably, before you do this, you'll want to set up a dimension layer. So set up a dimension layer in your drawing, then you'll go to that dimension layer on your Annotate tab and you'll start dimensioning. But one thing you'll probably notice is if I go in here and try and place a dimension, there's some tweaks you're probably going to want to make. Like right now this text size is probably a little bit too large, so I would shrink that text down a little bit so you can fit some more dimensions in there. And also, you really don't need, for a metric drawing, you can probably get away without having any decimal places. So go into your dim style manager and you're going to modify these so that they're a little bit more appropriate. So you'll want to go through probably and change your text size so it's a little bit smaller. You'll want to change the units so you have a precision of 0 decimal points. So go through and you might want to shrink down the arrowhead size a little bit right here also. So once you get all those set up, go through and dimension this drawing so that it's fully dimensioned, and the dimensions you need again will match up to this drawing, so that'll kind of help you figure out what dimensions you need and what ones you don't. And after you get all that done, you should have a complete full working drawing. So take what you see here and finish it out by placing those dimensions on there. Then you can save your drawing and upload your .dwg file to Blackboard in the week by week folder and look for Lab Q. So that's it for this one. So dimension it up, get it finished, and then upload it. If you have any questions, you can always email me or stop by my office, and I'll leave it up to you. So good luck, and we'll see you next time.